Professor Swaran Singh, how would you, the international media is actually reporting that there was no big breakthrough in the summit. It was rather tepid. What would the Chinese media want to project it as? What's the reporting happening within China as far as this summit is concerned?
See, you have to remember, Gauri, this was a meeting that was held on President Joe Biden's bidding for it. And this is the third interaction, but first face-to-face meeting online. And in that sense, if you look at the fact that it is on request of Joe Biden, that itself gives Chinese media enough freedom in that sense to put that strong position on the Chinese side. If you read the reporting in Global Times, for example, it looks like Xi Jinping really warned President Joe Biden in terms of not burning his hands, etc. in Taiwan. So it's a strongman kind of projection, optics that you will see in Chinese media to begin with. But to some extent, it's also true that President Joe Biden fully understands the changing equations when it comes to what Chinese call their core interests. In this case, Taiwan would be one of those core interests. Where if you heard recently, Joe Biden in his speech had said something which was soon rectified by the White House spokesperson, fundamentally shifting policy from not defending Taiwan, as has been the policy throughout, to now deterring China instead of not inflicting some kind of a unbearable damage on Taiwan. So that policy is definitely changing. Of course, it was repeatedly explained on it is still the strategic ambiguity that remains the policy on these issues. But right now, if you look at Joe Biden, as Professor Nalapur just mentioned earlier, after his precipitous withdrawing from Afghanistan, plus look at the raging pandemic and of course rising inflation in the United States, his numbers are tumbling down, and therefore there is a need to address his domestic constituencies to say, what they have said. Only message that comes out of meeting is they don't want to see competition veering into a conflict. Now that's a message to say that both sides feel that mutually hurting stalemate has come to such a stage that they need to really start a new chapter. So one could say that ambitious projection from the United States is to reset the relationship to ensure post-pandemic resilience of economy and no longer continue with ratcheting up of trade technology wars with Chinese. And in that sense, to some extent, I understand that Xi Jinping also has domestic issues, repeated power shortages or property crisis, but he recently comes out as the only choice, inevitable choice in case of Chinese to continue for his third term. In that sense, he's building himself for a longer future. Very few people are expecting President Joe Biden to contest next elections. So, one could see that the balance clearly is tilting here over a period of time, and the United States is understanding that. And that is why, even if the core of policies of United States continue to be same as Donald Trump, right, but unlike very confrontationist, bilateral, personalized policy, Joe Biden is doing the same thing in terms of much more subtle and finessed manner. And as Ambassador Bora would understand, diplomacy is all about finesse. Message is being conveyed, but compare his speech in climate change summit and what he was speaking at the opening of this meeting with President Xi Jinping, complete U-turn. So setting up certain amount of stage so that future could hold some possibilities of these two largest and second largest economies really contributing to the global resurgence or global resilience in terms of economy. So first message of Joe Biden is to domestic constituencies. Second message of Joe Biden is to his friends and allies, which also must be kept in good humor in terms of trusting United States as a leader which will stand up for issues like Taiwan. So yes, lip service was paid to all these issues of human rights, of Taiwan and other issues, but I don't think were really meaning much other than setting the stage for potential opening of the conversations between two sides. Chinese had promised but not still bought $200 billion worth of products from the United States. In that sense, trade continues to be increasingly one-sided. So one understands the advantages that China has in terms of leader being in command of the situation, country being in command of rising economy of what they call now 100 trillion yuan GDP, which is 16 trillion US dollars in current dollar terms. So they seem to be feeling in a bit of an intoxication of a leader going up and the country going up. I understand they have their, enemies. They have countries who don't trust Chinese. There will be many countries who don't trust Chinese. But China's deep pockets and rising, this new incarnation of rising China, as Srikanth was mentioning, the rising power versus, if you don't call it declining power, at least the status quo power in that sense. That equation clearly, no doubt, provides advantage United States. Chinese will take decades to match up with United States in terms of technology, military power. But the intoxication of a rising power is very different compared to the power which is, globally being described as declining power. So both sides understand their strengths and weaknesses in that sense. And therefore, I think only thing you will notice in this meeting is, I think, optics of this meeting to say, okay, we have come to, close a chapter of blatant contestations with each other. And we want to really talk to each other now and see what can be done in future. And therefore, I think this at best can be seen as a first step forward, which sends some positive message to both sides' domestic constituencies, but particularly to US friends and allies, including India. I suppose India will have to be very, very careful in analyzing what is happening here, because the more US and China comes closer, it could have implications for India-US relationship. The kind of rapid pace of coming closer and signing one after another foundational agreements, 2+2 dialogue starting, that happened because President Donald Trump had really very, very strong anti-China stance in his foreign policy. He was taking it very personalized, anti-China stance. And he showcased that in terms of standing with India, being, sort of repeatedly saying, I want to mediate with India-China relations, India-Pakistan relations, and so on. Now, if you quickly recall what happened after India's nuclear test in 1998,
right.
President Clinton came to Beijing and signed a joint statement that they will jointly look at South Asia's security. I'm not saying we are going that far, because there is a lot of autonomy in India-United States relationship now, with foundational agreements, defense partnerships, and others. There is enormous power of that bilateral relationship. But I am alluding to the fact that if this opening goes forward the way President Joe Biden would like it to see going, then it would have some influence, of course, on how India-United States relationship will move forward.
Okay.
But I understand that it is something which is only an opening. It may not go forward the way people are anticipating it to go forward, because there are too many differences between two sides.
Right.
They really don't see eye to eye on a dozen issues to begin with. So that's going to be a uphill task.
Okay, Professor Singh, let me